Hi everybody, Matt back with you. Take a look at this. This is Old Town. It's where I grew up. Went to school here. My mum is still here. This is the amazing view I grew up with. Just to the left of here, on the hill, you can see Studley Pike. The hills over there are above Mytholmroyd and up to Cragg Vale. That's where today's story takes place. So when I was at school, any mention of history and Mytholmroyd together, it's likely that the person who'd get mentioned would be Ted Hughes, the poet laureate, and then we'd probably go on to read The Iron Man. More recent times, though, Mytholmroyd has become known as something else. It's become known as coiners' country, because there's been, certainly over the last decade, a lot of interest generated in a certain notorious group of counterfeiters from the 18th century. They're known as the Cragg coiners, and around the time they almost brought down the British currency system. Now there's about to be a TV series this weekend called The Gallows Pole, which is likely to generate even more interest. The novel was by Benjamin Myers, and although it features the characters and the places, it is a fictionalised account of what might have been said between those people at the time. In this video, I'm going to go up 3 hills to give you what I class as an abridged look at some of the people and some of the places that the coiners would have been found in or involved with. All of those mean I have to climb some hills. So we start with a man called David Hartley. He was an ironworker in Birmingham in the mid-18th century, so roughly 1750s and 60s. Whilst he was being an ironworker, he found a new skill that he could do by taking coins, very, very gently shaving or clipping the edge of the coin to a point that nobody would recognise there was anything different about the original coin. But Hartley would have the shavings and the clippings from those coins. He would melt them down and then stamp them so that they looked like new coins. This was obviously a potential lucrative business, making new money. However, being in Birmingham, even then it was quite busy. So he returned to Mytholmroyd, to a place called Bell House, which is just on top of the hill over there. So now we're heading up the hill to Bell House Farm. Now, with no disrespect to Birmingham, look at this. We are definitely not in Birmingham anymore. The reason Hartley moved here must be obvious, because up here at Bell House he could carry on his trade still under the name ironworker, but carry out his coining with almost no fear of being caught by the authorities. He'd seen people get caught in Birmingham, which had worried him. So heading here to the moorlands above Mytholmroyd, who on earth was going to know what was going on? And as we reach the top of this path, we look across the field, get our first glimpse of Bell House Farm, the home and the starting place of the Cragg coiners. The farm is now privately owned, so I won't go any closer than this. And please respect the privacy there if you do come and visit. However, from here, Hartley started to gather his gang. He'd go to other nearby farms, show them what he was up to, and as they were short of money too, they were almost very happy to join in. And soon, the team of coiners had reached roughly 30. And they decided it was time to start taking their money down into the nearby town of Mytholmroyd. From high on the hill, the gang set about their trade, making their coins. Soon, a good number of them were involved in the business. And the man at the top, David Hartley, was given a new title. They called him King David Hartley. To get the coins into circulation, Hartley made some deals with local innkeepers, including at what is now the Dusty Miller in Mytholmroyd. The landlord of the Dusty Miller seemed only too pleased to give out loans to the coiners for them to use his coins to create new ones, safe in the knowledge he would get his money back and more besides. Entering our story comes William Deighton, a custom and tax excise man from Halifax. Now at this point, the coining had been going on for some time. One or two people had been arrested, and at their trials, it just so happened that they may well have mentioned that there was a gang operating in Cragg Vale. This set Deighton on his mission to track down this gang and its leader and bring them to justice. He became the Javert to David Hartley's Valjean. William Deighton was often seen riding across the hills here in his search for the coiners. At that point, the coiners would usually descend down into the woodland. So now we're in Broadclough Nature Reserve, at least that's what it is today, very near to Bell Bottom Wood. It's been said that when things got too hot for the coiners, they would disappear into the woodland and hide when anybody came looking for them. Now interestingly, not too many years ago, it was also rumoured that behind a stone in a wall here, they discovered some of the coiners' coins. I'm quite surprised that hasn't brought a lot more people to this area. Maybe now it will. James Broadbent was one of the coiners. He's a 33-year-old from Mytholmroyd. Yet somehow he never became part of the in crowd with the coiners, and also didn't seem to be able to make quite as much money as the others. Feeling a little bit dejected, his father came to him and asked him if he would like to make some real money. The Broadbents headed over to Todmorden, and in a nearby pub they met William Deighton. At the meeting, Broadbent was asked if he would like 100 guineas. He agreed. The only thing he had to do was to basically tell anything he knew about any coiners to earn that money. Broadbent said that he had seen James Jagger clipping coins and also King David Hartley. That was enough. Deighton could get his man. Armed with his evidence, Deighton descended upon the Old Cock Inn in Halifax and arrested Hartley. Jagger was nearby at the Cross Pipes, and they were sent to York Jail for trial. After the arrest, Broadbent waited quite some time for his money. In fact, it never appeared. Because of this, he kind of felt anger towards both Deighton and what he'd done. So he approached David Hartley's brother, Isaac, told him what had happened, and that also he would be willing to go to court to change his evidence to try and free David and James. Although he did this, the judge at the court refused to accept this as new evidence, purely going off the first thing he'd said as being the truth. After this, a lot of angry coiners descended upon the Dusty Miller once again in Mytholmroyd. The coiners gathered again at the Dusty Miller to plan out their next move. With their king in prison, the question was asked at the meeting, how do you solve a problem like William Deighton? There were a few proposals put forward. Let's go and threaten his family. Let's go and beat him up. In his own way, Deighton had quite arrogance at the coiners themselves, fearing that they were probably all just cowards who would constantly run away wherever he was. But that proved to be his mistake, because at the meeting it was decided that the only way to solve the problem of Deighton was to get him out of the way permanently. A reward was offered for Deighton's head, not literally. Two of the coiners stepped forward, and the plan was set in action. So now we're on Bull Close Lane in Halifax. Obviously looks a bit different than it did 250 years ago. Let's head down it and see what we can find. Deighton lived on Bull Close Lane. On November the 10th, 1769, he was heading back home in the evening. He was approached by two men, Matthew Normanton and Robert Thomas. He was shot in the head. The two men then robbed him, and his body was stamped on. Nearby, his wife had heard noise outside, sent for the maid to come and help, but too scared to do much else, they got some help from a neighbour and went out and found Deighton dying on the street. They carried his body back to the house. Outraged at the murder of Deighton, the government on the 14th of November Let loose this man, Charles Watson Wentworth, the Marquis of Rockingham and former Prime Minister. He was sent out to hunt down Deighton's killers. By now, there were 80 counterfeiters known to be operating across the hills of Calderdale, 30 in Cragg Vale, and some in Halifax, Wadsworth and Midgley. Soon, 20 of them were arrested. Also entering our story now is Robert Parker, a solicitor from Halifax. And if the coiners thought that Deighton had been bad, they had no idea what was awaiting when Parker got involved. Because although Deighton had managed to bring down the king, the rest of the king's court needed removing as well. That was Parker's job. Parker's job was to ensure that those responsible for Deighton's death were brought to justice and faced the harshest punishment. Also, anyone involved in coining would also face the ultimate fate. Now we're in Heptonstall. Above us here is the Cross Keys Inn. Inside the Cross Keys Inn was Abraham Ingham. He got talking to the coiners when they were there. Whether or not he knew they were the coiners is debatable, because what he said was that he knew who'd killed William Deighton and he was going to report them. Perhaps he hadn't realised that they were in the pub at the time. So this group, who now became quite paranoid about the fact that if they were ever caught, they were certain to face death, grabbed Ingham, pushed him onto the fireplace and shoved his head into the fire. As he tried to escape, they grabbed a pair of tongs next to the fire, opened them and held them on his neck, keeping his head in the fire at all times. They even, just to make sure, grabbed hot coals out of the fire and shoved them down his trousers. An awful way to go, and another murder. So now we're at the Halifax Gibbet, on Gibbet Street. This is a very macabre sign of Halifax's past, where executions took place quite frequently in this area. This, of course, is where you would put your head. The blade would fall across your neck and chop your head off. And although it stands here today and is obviously a replica that is not in use, the gibbet once stood on Beacon Hill, which you can see in the distance on our next stop. William Deighton was buried here at Halifax Minster and Halifax Parish Church. His wife was also buried with him eventually. Despite my best efforts, because of the passage of time, I couldn't find the gravestone today. So now I'm heading up a path from Halifax that's known as the Wakefield Gate. This is a cobbled path that you can see, and it's the original route between Halifax and Wakefield. And at the top of here is Beacon Hill. The views of Halifax are already quite spectacular from here. Just wait till we reach the top. We're definitely in the location of an old house or mill here. Those stairs with the tree are growing right through the middle. So we're almost at the top of Beacon Hill. As we reach here and look across, here is Halifax. So from here we see the gibbet. We can also find right at the end with the information about the beacon. Just here, during the 18th century, the bodies of executed men, including the coiners, were suspended in chains at the top of the hill. Just about here. So in 1774, the arrests took place of both Robert Thomas and Matthew Normanton, the killers of Mr. Deighton. Thomas had been identified because his boots, the soles had a certain pattern from various nails stuck in them, and that pattern was found on Deighton's clothing and body where they'd stamped on him. Thomas was executed and his body brought here to Beacon Hill, hung from those gallows poles. The fingers on his body, on his hand, were pointing to where the murder had taken place. Normanton was also arrested, but actually on suspicion of coining, not of the murder at that point. And he'd originally fled and hidden at a place called Spa Lathe in Cragg Vale, but he was caught. Unfortunately for him, he missed his date appearance at court and was found guilty in his absence, and he was sentenced to death. So when Normanton was eventually captured, he was also executed. Once again, his body brought here to Beacon Hill, hung from the gallows, and the fingers on his hand pointing to Bullclose Lane, where the murder had taken place, as a warning to others. Now, when Robert Thomas was put here, there was a public outcry from the people in Halifax at the barbarity of what had happened. However, when it came to Normanton, they strung him up here at the dead of night to avoid those confrontations with the public. So we leave our Halifax side of the story here. We head back down and make our way to Heptonstall to continue the story of the king. No record is known to exist of the comings and goings of the trial of David Hartley. All that is known is that he was found guilty, and he was hung from the gallows pole at York. So now I'm heading up the buttress, an incredibly steep cobbled road from Hebden to only really halfway to Heptonstall before it zigzags off somewhere else. This was the final route David Hartley took in his coffin when his body was returned from York to be buried at Heptonstall. It had already travelled 50 miles across the valley from York to Hebden, this being its final route. You can imagine it wasn't the most popular. For anyone who lives in Hebden, you'll know just how steep this route actually is. En route there were many mourners, specifically in Hebden, when the coffin started to be carried up the hill from there. It's likely the procession probably stopped at the hole in the wall. And it seems odd now, doesn't it, to think of a criminal getting such treatment, of even having a grave with a name on it. But what do you think about David Hartley and the coiners? Usually when I do my videos, I try not to give my own opinion, just try and present a few facts, a few names and places, and let you tell me what you think. But really, David was probably, of all of them, the one who comes off this best of all. Yes, he was up to wrongdoing and naturally faced his maker in the end, but he doesn't seem to have been involved in the violent side of the group that was happening. It's certainly like Isaac, his brother, and the others who were committing the murders were doing. So is he this anti-hero? Because basically, was he just creating money because there wasn't any? Or is he, what others would say, a violent criminal who got his just deserts? So we conclude our coiner story right here in Heptonstall graveyard. This is the original church that stands here, obviously now a ruin. There is a new church off to the left. We have filmed here before, and also in this graveyard is Sylvia Plath. But who we are looking for today is the grave of the king himself. Now he is actually quite easy to spot. If I span around first, does anything stand out? Yes, the coins. Here he is, the king himself, David Hartley. Here interred the body of Grace Hartley and David Hartley, a grandson, who departed this life February 23rd, 1845. Gosh, I thought I said 125 years. Also of David Hartley, father, who died February 26th. There's a few David Hartleys in here. Next to it, though, I believe there should be another Hartley nearby. Let's see if we can find it. But look at these amazing old gravestones. So yes, unfortunately I can't see Isaac. I know it's obvious, but it's not springing out to me. But his brother is buried nearby. But yeah, this is the grave of David, right here. And he's the one we want at the top. 1770. In this book, which I've used for some of my references, it was written in 1971, seems to suggest that the coiner's story vanished for 200 years before bizarrely being reenacted in a play at Calder High School with the pupils taking on the parts. From then on in, the history seemed to need to come back to life. For example, with this church being ruined, David Hartley was kind of hidden, lost. William Deighton is lost somewhere in Halifax. All these names were lost to time. So it's really only in the last 50 years, and certainly in the last 10, with the Gallows Pole book, these characters have reappeared. And it's certainly a story that's unlikely to go away. In the meantime, thank you for watching. Hope you've enjoyed it. If you plan on watching the TV show, let's see if it's any way connected to some of the history I've told you today. Thank you as well. I've just hit 400 subscribers. That makes me very happy. But do keep liking, sharing, commenting and subscribing on my videos if you can. And yeah, if you've enjoyed this one, there are about nearly 400 videos on my channel now. Why not have a flick through, see if you can find another one that you might like. For now though, from a very sunny Hebden, I say take care. We'll see you soon. Bye for now.